So should we hit go live now?
It is live, I think.
All right, we are live. Oh my goodness, it actually worked. Yay. Gosh, all you peeps out there in internet world, thank you for your patience. I'm hoping that you will take the time to pop on in to the Dog is Good Lifestyle Show, because we have a really important conversation to have today. If you are first tuning in, my name is Gila Kurtz. I am one of the co-founders and co-owners of Dog is Good, which is a company that is all about the relationship that you have with your dog and how they enhance your life. Because let's face it, you love your dog. What I know to be true is dogs love me, and I love Dog is Good too. So if you are also watching the replay, please go ahead and enter to win our giveaway. We'll be doing a giveaway that we do every single week. And Grisha also has a giveaway too, which is really awesome. In fact, no one else knows about this yet, so you are going to be the first to hear of it. Our giveaway is the Dog is Love t-shirt. So with Valentine's Day coming up, this is a must-have. Of course, it's something you want to have all year round. But Grisha, you go ahead and tell them what you are giving away.
Okay, so I teach online classes, and then I also host online classes. And I have, starting February 20th, Michael Shikashio is going to be teaching a dog aggression case consult course. So that he'll be coaching a couple of clients with their dogs and showing that by live video. So I'm super excited. That is now, I'm just announcing it today. Actually, I'm planning on announcing it tomorrow, but you guys get a sneak peek. And one student will get a free pass for that course. So we'll be giving that away here on the show.
Awesome. And we will put in the link where you can enter to win. We don't pick the winner until tomorrow. So for those of you watching the replay, you can certainly take advantage of that opportunity too. And how cool is that? So I'm really excited. I got to share with you a little bit of backstory. So for those of you who do not know me, I am a professional dog trainer as well. I have been training dogs for the past 20 plus years. Which is crazy that I'm even saying that, but it's true. And in the past several years, I have focused primarily on helping families with their new puppies. So puppy development and ensuring they raise them properly so they stay with them for the life of the dog. But interesting story is Grisha and I met totally by chance at an APDT conference. We were roommates there. She is brilliant, and she went on to build such an amazing business that has served people all over the world, primarily because of the signature program that she was able to create to truly help and empower dogs who are struggling with reactivity behaviors and so much more. So I'm just so excited that things have come full circle and we're here together today to share the conversation. Please share this with anybody that you know who is struggling with whether it's anxiety-based behavior, fear-based behavior, reactivity-based behaviors, because Grisha is the gal. She is the expert, and you are going to want to learn from her. Let me give a proper introduction, a little background on Grisha. She is the author and international speaker and
Your audio is
a trainer based in Oregon.
Okay. Gila, your screen is frozen for me, and I don't know if that's
just doing okay.
My side.
No, I'm not frozen.
Okay.
Are you frozen?
Oh, I don't know.
Good?
Okay, it's kind of off and on. Oh, and there you go. You're gone.
Okay. Are we good now?
Okay, yes.
We're good now? Okay. Stephanie, if you are watching, I need you to communicate with me by text. Okay, she says we're live and we are good.
Okay.
Y'all, this is the modern thing of technology, and maybe the internet doesn't want to cooperate with us today, but we are going to power through, and I thank you for your patience. Please pop in the comments where you're from and your dog. I'd love to see some comments coming through, and also because we want to be able to see questions that you might be asking specifically for the assistance of maybe your dog or a friend that you might know. Anyway, so let me back up for this. Where I might have gotten frozen. Grisha She's an author. She's an international speaker. She's an entrepreneur who has built an amazing dog training business specializing in the area of reactivity. She lives in Oregon and founded the Empowered Animals and online animal building blocks academy, as well as Ahimsa dog training in Seattle. Grisha's Ahimsa team earned many awards, including Best of Seattle and Best of Western Washington. Ahimsa is a Buddhist doctrine of nonviolence to all living things, which reflects Grisha's focus on force-free methods to promote the well-being of dogs and their humans. Her seminal book, Behavior Adjustment Training, BAT, for Aggression, Reactivity, and Fear in Dogs, was published by Dogwise in late 2011. Her popular second book, The Official Ahimsa Dog Training Manual, a practical, force-free guide to problem solving and manners, was published in 2012 and updated again in 2014. She has done over a dozen DVDs with 6 currently in print, and her third, BAT 2.0, was just recently released in early 2016. So, Grisha, just a roster of accomplishments on your resume. So thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us. And also thank you for your patience as we were getting this broadcast uploaded.
No worries, Gayla. And I just, we'll appreciate the patience of those who are out there. The fact that we even have some folks. Hi, Cheryl. I see the comments coming through.
No, we have quite a few folks on there. And if somebody could drink a glass of wine for me, that would be great right now. All right. So let's just get right down into it, because this really is a serious subject matter. I mentioned that in my history of training, I've trained all types of behaviors, whether it's basic manners, I've done the reactivity, but my area of focus is puppies. And I always will refer a customer or client to an expert like you, because this really requires a very delicate and strategic approach. We're talking about the life of the dog here, and certainly the potential harm that could be done if this isn't addressed. And it's also frustrating for people. I get it when they're dealing with reactivity. So let's right out of the gate explain to us specifically what that is and when it should be used for what types of behavior specifically.
So BAT is specifically for reactivity, both the prevention of reactivity and also the rehabilitation. So we use BAT with puppies. We also use BAT with dogs who have already developed issues like frustration, fear, running away, freezing, barking, biting, that whole gamut of behaviors, specifically, especially when it comes to meeting new people. So meeting new strangers, meeting other dogs, and that sort of thing. So BAT is about helping dogs navigate a social situation on their own, which doesn't mean that they're completely left, out on their own to, just go fend for yourselves, but to give them the tools that we don't have to micromanage them. And so we don't need to give corrections. We don't have to yell at them. We don't have to tell them what not to do. We do, however, need to set them up for success. And so what BAT does is we create this sort of scenario that feels really safe for the dog. It brings out their curiosity. And then we start to see really good social behaviors. So according to polyvagal theory, basically says that if we feel safe, our pro-social behaviors will come out. And that's exactly what we're seeing in BAT, that we're kind of, at first, we're working at enough of a distance that the dogs are comfortable, and then they're learning to, engage, disengage, show appropriate behavior that isn't about barking, growling, biting, and that sort of thing. So it's different from corrections, because we're not saying, don't do this, but it's also very different from the standard positive reinforcement model as well, which is also very specific about do this, do this, do this. Gives the dog a lot of freedom. And in order to do that, we need to create really safe environments.
That's great. Can you give me an example? Because it sounds like this is actually a technique that one would want to implement with any dog early on to prevent, as a preventative measure, of those kinds of behaviors. So give me an example of maybe with a young puppy implementing this technique. And then I'd like to have you discuss a real life example of a dog that maybe you've worked with who was showing reactivity behavior and really set up the scene for what you did to help with that.
Sure. So with a puppy, for example, the first thing that I would do would be to teach, first I would teach the handler leash skills and body language. So how to recognize when their dog is feeling comfortable and when they aren't. And so that body language is, of course, key for any training technique that we do. But really recognizing that those behaviors are requests for getting their needs met. So,
okay, I'm going to interject a question in here
yeah,
because I see a lot of some of these things, potential problems pop up with people, and I want you to kind of address it. I'm going to call it out. So as you mentioned, holding the leash, what do you see when you are working with people, the thing that they are doing, they're not aware of it, but what is it that they actually do that starts off the process that makes it difficult for the dog? What is it about their body language?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that people do. So one, first of all, is that with a leash, they tend to keep the leash really tight during greetings, and that makes it very hard for the dog to be able to move away when they want to. It sets their body language up to be inappropriate for the other dog. They kind of look like they're puffing up to the other dog when they're actually just being pulled back by their caregiver.
Right.
And so working on just having a loose leash for one thing. And then also just being able to set our body up so that we're not blocking the exit, because we need to preserve the exit for the dog. And so watching for if they were going to turn to their right, for example, would that mean that they walk right into you? Or are you standing in a place that is sort of forcing that social situation to keep going? So that kind of thing is what we would do with Bat is I teach people how to use a 5-meter or a 15-foot leash, because for me, being able to have that space, allowing the dog to be able to move away if he wants to, it makes all the difference. Also prevents pulling, which is really nice too.
Yeah, you're bringing on two good points that I want to highlight from you guys. And by the way, I want to thank you and recognize all of you coming in and saying hi. We feel like we are with our family now.
Yes,
we were looking at a dead screen for the longest time. So thank you and welcome. So what you mentioned, and I want to ask the audience, as you're listening to this, think about how you are with your own dog. Maybe tonight or tomorrow morning when you're out walking or just with your dog, notice what your own posture is. Are you somebody that kind of holds that leash tight and kind of begins to pull back when you see another dog? Or are you with your own dog, a younger dog, or you see something and you're so enthralled with the two dogs that you're not paying attention to the impact that your body has on what Grisha just mentioned, your dog's ability to exit the scenario if they chose to. So these are really good points. I just want to highlight them as you say them.
Yeah, and actually making sure that you're just breathing. That's important as well.
It's funny how people kind of stop with that. How many of you guys give a thumbs up if you tend to do that? You get nervous. You see other dogs out there on leash with you.
Yeah, and of course, when people first have a puppy, they're like, "Yay, this will be great, no problems." But the first time that they start to get a little bit more mature and they have problems, then the person starts to get almost like PTSD. And so we're planning for something to go wrong. So we tense up, we hold our breath. And it's just, if it feels like a gamble, like your dog is probably going to show aggression, then you shouldn't be doing the grading in the first place. And that would be time to consult with a trainer and actually have them coach you through something like that. So,
all right. So taking you back to where you left off, you were saying that the first step is learning how to hold the leash, what your breathing posture is, and your body position.
Right. And then I use a round leash. So I use something like this one, or this kind of wider one. So I'm looking for something that's not likely to give a rope burn to the person, and that allows us to have a longer leash and still have that sort of sense of safety. Because it's round, there's actually a lot more surface area, and that means that there's less heat on your hands.
Okay.
So
do people feel, and I understand where it's easier, but do people feel they don't have control because the dog's so far away?
So without the actual training of how to use a leash, then they don't have as much control, and it's just dangerous. And so don't just go buy a 15-foot leash and then complain that it's not working. Because it takes this sort of step by step. And I do have on my website all those steps written out. Of course, it's in the book and the other resources, but if you can learn from just a little blog, that's in there too. So, so really getting that leash skill down so that we have safety. So feeling like we have control of the dog, but also that the dog has a sense of freedom. And that requires really being aware of our body position, where we are, letting the line out, letting it, bringing it in at the right time. So we become sort of a human flexi leash, so that there's not that tension that you get with a flexi, but you get that freedom that most people really understand that dogs enjoy.
Fantastic. So how do you, if we could just hold on that thought for 1 second.
We don't want the tight. of tightness of a flexi. Just saying, that's just a terrible plan. Sorry, go back to what you were saying.
Oh, I'm sorry. What did you say about the flexi?
Don't use them. It's a terrible plan.
I had my friends who have a puppy last night asked me that same question. I'm like, big X and no, sorry, flexi, but doesn't work for the dog. As you're teaching people how to use a leash, you can prevent some of these things from becoming behavior problems in the first place. But let's say you're the individual who just rescued a dog. I'm going to go with two scenarios.
Okay.
Person who's just rescued a dog, they don't have a history of it, but it's very evident from the first time out that this dog definitely is reacting to things, whether it's another dog or maybe a person. How do you then take them through this technique to begin to help that dog reduce its anxiety and its behavior problems, so that the person because sorry, I'll just say this one last thing and let you speak, is
sure.
It's frustrating for the people, and then they don't end up getting out with the dog, and then the dog, it's a vicious cycle. So how do you address that?
Absolutely. So there's basically two aspects that I need to cover. One is, how do you get through your regular walk without it becoming a nightmare? And then on the other side, how can we do the actual training that will help the dog long term? Okay. So one is more of a coping strategy, right? And the other is actually changing the mindset of the dog.
Okay.
And so the coping strategy is things like, using treats, all of the kind of the standard positive dog training tricks. So I'll explain what that means for those of you guys out there. So it means, crossing the street. It means putting a treat to your dog's nose to get around something. It means putting your body in between your dog and the thing that they might be reacting to. It means walking at times of day that your dog is less likely to see triggers, right? So these are coping strategies. So if you were an anxious person, this would be kind of the equivalent of not going to the party yet because it's still too stressful for you. But maybe going up, to small gatherings of your friends at that time. And then meanwhile, you also want to be in therapy, right? So the therapy would be the dog training that we're doing, and that's the BAT setups. So in the first session, I usually go over those survival skills, which I also have a DVD specifically about survival skills. So we'll talk about that. And then I'll also then start to do the leash skills. And then in our second meeting, I'll start to talk about BAT setups and what those look like. And what they look like is really, really boring. So the dog is like walking around in a field or in a parking lot or some area, just exploring that space. And there happens to be another dog or a person or something in the vicinity. And so the dog is just kind of meandering. We'll be following that dog, our student dog. So the owner, the caregiver, is letting the dog lead, which I know sounds like the exact opposite of what you want to do. But it turns out that a lot of the human leading that we've been doing is what's been putting the dog in harm's way in the first place. So these straight sidewalks where we walk them directly up to another dog and so on. So teaching the dog that he can walk in curves and that we'll honor that need for space. And then the only thing that the human is really doing during the BAT setups is watching for body language that says the dog is stressed. And if so, helping him get out of that situation. So calling the dog away or whatever else. And so usually the best indicator that your dog is going to have an overreaction when you have a dog with reactivity issues is if they're walking in a straight line at the other dog. So the moment that you see them walking directly at another dog, that's a good time to just either slowly stop and then let them assess the situation. Or if the other dog is coming at them, then you just need to call your dog and move away. So those straight lines can be really threatening for dogs. And so in the early training especially, we want to do a slow stop whenever that dog starts to go in a direct line.
Okay, interesting. And so when you stop, does the dog turn to you, or is it still trying to move at the...
Yeah, so usually what we see is, so the dog is walking directly at the trigger, right? So we just stop and then we wait. And then eventually his nose starts working. And then eventually he's like, oh, and he doesn't have to look at me. He just looks away. And I'm not specifically marking and reinforcing like we would with most positive reinforcement training. So usually at that point, the dog is just like, oh, what's over here? And so as they start wandering in another direction, we just follow them. So the reinforcer comes from the environment. That social reinforcer of my disengagement was effective for making me safe. Okay, so the conversation itself is is part of the reinforcer for the dog.
Okay, so you're not actually cueing the dog like, Henry, watch me, and giving him a treat. You're allowing him to just disengage on his own and then feel that relaxation, if you will, because he's no longer focused on the trigger.
Correct. And I would, as a survival skill, I would say, Henry, let's go, or whatever else. At times when I didn't think he could do it on his own, but anytime I think that the dog is able, where's my camera? That the dog is able to disengage and, move on, then I'm going to let that happen. Because then it's either a positive reinforcer because he's smelled an odor and he's going after that, or it's a negative reinforcer. In both cases, it's just natural. It's naturally occurring reinforcement. So that cool thing is that because I didn't have to give the treat and I didn't ask him to do it, it means that it's a behavior that will stick because he's learned that this works in this situation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I'm wondering also, I just wanted to ask if his ability to make his own decision and disengage, therefore reducing the anxiety that he's feeling in that moment, there's that self-reinforcement there. But would you also then provide any other form of reinforcement and praise, touch, turning and walking in the other direction? Or are there any other secondary reinforcers that come into play here?
So one reinforcer that comes into play is that you're following along with the dog. So you have that sort of, going as a group. So that's an aspect, is that family stayed with me, right? So that's okay. So very calm, like verbal praise is okay. But what tends to happen if we use exciting praise or if we use treats is that we actually distract from the lesson that they just learned from the social situation. So this is one of those weird times when, as a dog trainer, we actually have to be like, So,
that same thing. Yeah.
And if it's a shelter dog, like this week, I'm doing an online course with shelter dogs, and they don't know who we are from Adam. And so they're not likely to get into this like excited working mode. So with them, we do build a little bit more connection. So we praise a little bit, we give more treats during the session. But let's say we have a really well-trained border collie. With them, we have to try very, very hard not to get them into working mode. Because the moment we get them into like healing or paying attention to us, then the conversation, it gets muted that they were having with that other dog. And I want them paying attention to that.
And what sounds interesting to me too is there's probably a necessary conversation that has to take place with the person, the handler, because as people, we have these high expectations for like we need to be doing something, right? we need to be providing feedback in some respect. So how do what's the communication with the human at the other end of the leash? How are you coaching them?
So with that coaching, one thing I make sure to always point out is when their dog has looked at the other dog or the trigger and then has turned away, because otherwise what happens is we wander around the space, and if the human, like the handler, doesn't notice that their dog has really made several good choices, then they think they wasted their time.
Right.
So, and what happens over time is that the dog becomes more and more comfortable. That distance will decrease. But if we have the agenda of decreasing the distance, then we're going to be standing in such a way, like if this is the dog, we might accidentally position ourselves here that then draws the dog forward. So we sort of accidentally lead. And so the coaching for the handlers, things like telling them to breathe and relaxing their arms, and being a model of relaxation for their dog. And so that's what they can do, is really show their dog how chill they are. And that also then starts to have an effect. So setting up a safe scenario and being relaxed in it.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that is such a big piece of it, is them being the model for sure, and exhibiting the very behaviors that they're trying to help their dog with right out of the gate. Does the person ever get to a place where they've gone through the training, and I know each dog is different, but is there a point at which, once they get back to, they're not going to be walking in a field for all their time, they're going to do their regular dog walk. So how do you help them transfer what they've been doing back into real world and keep them cognizant and fully aware, so that they don't fall into old patterns? And I'm just curious about the longevity and success. I know it's super successful. I'm curious how that process breaks out.
Yeah. So there's those two pieces. There's the survival skills and then the setups. And so basically, as the person is seeing that their dog is so successful in these setups, where he's made 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 friends, then we start to know how close their dog can be to other dogs. And so on the walks, then the person is maybe not feeding right away. They're waiting for their dog to disengage on the walks as well. And so it just becomes, we don't actually really have to coach it specifically, because the person really starts to understand their dog. Honestly, BAT is really all about teaching people how to read their dogs well. And so once they have that, then they're not needing to use as much of a crutch out in the world. So they're not having to distract and use treats, because they know exactly where their dog's limits are. So that gets easier and easier over time. And so the thing about BAT is that it works best when people actually work to the point of friendship with their dog, with another dog or person. And then, that first friendship may take 2 or 3 meetings before they actually can become friends. But then the next one maybe only takes 2 meetings. And then the next person that you try, it's only 1. And then it gets faster and faster. And because we're not using a lot of food, and the dog is not dependent on us giving cues, it generalizes really well. So it becomes just a habit for the dogs and the people out on the walks as well.
Okay. And how long does the process take, would you say, on average? I realize there's a spectrum of behaviors we're talking about.
How big is a glass? So it is, I would say, anywhere between sometimes I have really fast cases, but average would be 2 months, 2 to 6 months, something around that range. It depends on how many sessions the person can do, how much they push it. Right. If they push their dog to the edge where they're not feeling comfortable during their sessions, it may take forever. If they're using treats all the time, it makes it take longer. So it depends on a lot of factors. And of course, how long the dog has been doing it. Has he killed another dog versus is he just a puppy that's a little bit nervous?
Right.
But it's actually, the leash skills become a way of life. And so it's really nice, because it gives the dog this good sense of freedom that improves their quality of life right away. And I find for people, if you have a dog who pulls on leash, learning the BAT leash skills, whether the dog is reactive or not, hands down will improve your life.
Completely. That's it's the one thing I tell all my clients, it's the one thing that seems to be the hardest, but it's really a dance. It's just this lovely dance. And when you can when you understand what the steps are, it's very, very easy to do.
Yeah.
You guys, I'm going to move on to ask some additional questions, but I also want to encourage you, if you have some very specific questions you want to ask Grisha, please pop those in. We will happily answer those, get those answered for you. You mentioned,
lots of questions out there.
Yes, you did. How do you handle this in a scenario when you're dealing with children, also when there's a reactive or aggressive dog in the household? What advice do you have for people?
And is the dog reactive to the children, or the dog is reactive to dogs, but there's a child in the household?
Well, I would, just how do you basically approach training dogs with aggressive behaviors when in a home where there's also going to be children and dogs? Yeah.
Got it. So, and it, like I said, it does kind of depend as to whether the child is really the target of the aggression or not. Mm-hmm. But either way,
let's say the child is.
Okay, worst case scenario.
I actually just had I was telling you prior, somebody just emailed me about that very thing. Their dog bit their 4-year-old.
Got it. And so one thing is, first of all, to make sure that everybody is safe. So separation right away with a locked door in between that the child can't access, right? So we don't want the dog to be in a place where the child can accidentally open the door. And then ideally that we might even have an interstitial space, so a space in between. So they're not just like walking right up to the door where the dog is. And then in terms of training, I do BAT setups with dogs and kids all the time. One person is hanging out with the child, the other, just like you would do if you have a dog decoy. So one is with the child, and then the dog has a handler who's walking with them. And then you're walking at a distance from the child that feels safe to the dog. So you're a little farther away. And then gradually starting to reintegrate. So just doing walks together for a long time, and then starting to add the home into part of it as well. And then I mean, I can only really give enough information here to be dangerous, right?
Right,
So it's
right.
like, how do you
very
build a ship,
situational. Yeah.
right? And then I tell you how to build a ship, and then it turns into the Titanic because I only gave instructions, in a broadcast.
No, certainly.
But
Everybody, please know, just these are suggestions, and really,
hire
at
a
the end of the
trainer,
day,
right?
yes, you can reach out to Grisha also after this conversation as well. Kalia wants to know, what about other kinds of triggers? People wearing, hoods or with sunglasses or walking sticks that tend to trigger a dog.
Mm-hmm. And before I answer that, I want to circle back to the issue with children.
So, okay.
So one thing is also, coaching the child on body language. If it's just a really mild issue, right? So really making sure that the child is aware of body language, and that the children and dogs should never be together unsupervised, especially for kids under the age of 7. They just shouldn't be unsupervised. And by supervision, I mean like literally sitting there watching the interaction, not like you're watching TV and there happens to be a dog and a child in the room. And then I also wanted to give a shout out to the CBATties, so the certified BAT instructors. Those are your folks that are your go-to dog trainers who are certified to teach BAT. And I have a list on my website and also on the officialbatschool.com.
Oh, that's awesome. And by the way, for any of you who are trainers out there that want to add this to your toolbox for skill sets to grow your business, certainly you can go through Grisha's certification program to do so, which is awesome.
Thank you.
Good for you.
And then your question, I'm sorry, for someone with a hoodie and so
just walking with sticks. Yeah.
Yeah. And so basically we need to generalize to all of the different ways that that humans can look. So we can be little, we can be big, we can have hats, we can be, moving around or not moving around, or wheelchairs. And so a dog needs to see all of those things. And whenever you make one thing difficult, you have to make it something else easy. So usually we just increase the distance and then allow the dog to reapproach with that. A lot of times I'll work with a helper that the dog has already met in a more neutral body position. So once they actually get up close, they're like, oh, you're my friend Bob that I met last week. And that can make that go a lot faster.
Oh, that's great. So Julianne has a Labra healer. Awesome. Rescued at 1. Constantly has his nose down. No surprise. Huge puller. What would you share with Julianne to help her with that?
So first thing I would do is make sure that he's wearing the right gear. So I would have him in a harness, a well-fitted harness that's not restricting his airway and also not restricting his armpits. And then I usually attach the harness to the back and the front if the dog is a giant puller. So if there's ever any like big pulling that happens in the back, but you have the front to be able to give a little bit more steering. So you can get a double-ended leash or put a carabiner at the handle end of a leash and then clip that. So the symmetry line is a double-ended leash, for example. And anyway, so that, and then I would be giving treats whenever your dog pays attention to you. So if he looks up at you, say yes, give a treat. And then I would be doing lots of changing of direction. So learn the bat leash skills. So learn how to handle a 15-foot leash. But basically, when you see that the dog is going a little bit too quickly, you would do what I call a slow stop. So I would do slide and then a slow stop, which I know doesn't have any meaning to you right now, but it does. Those are defined terms that you can Google. Anyway, and then change direction. So the dog has to follow you. And then when he does, there's that sweet spot where he happens to be near you. You can give a treat for that. But really switching to that 5-foot or 5 meter or 15-foot leash makes a huge difference. You don't just hang on to the end of the handle, though. So you need to make sure that that you're actually you're handling it in such a way that you're that most of the time you're only about 6 feet away from the dog, but you can let out the line when he's maybe running to a tree or he's running to an odor. And that makes him a lot more tired on the walks and just gives you a lot more freedom. So you don't have to slow him down quite so much. And then when it is time to slow him down, then you haven't just nagged him for the entire walk. And so he's more willing to listen.
And also, I just want to add to that walk time is the perfect bonding time. So
yes,
very difficult to handle a leash properly with expertise when you are trying to also use your phone. So people, this is that time your dog craves this moment. Put the phone away for that alone, because you need, it's a dance and you need to be fully engaged in it. So that's great.
Yeah. And there's a myth that your dog is not supposed to be sniffing on a walk. It's like, it's like taking you shopping and saying, don't look at any of the clothes.
Right. Oh, how dare you? Do not.
How dare you? Dogs are primarily, they use their noses to get information. And so, by all means, let him smell. I do have a DVD called Walk With Me that gives kind of a collection of different tips for that, including the bat leash skills, but also different ways we can reinforce good leash behavior.
You guys, I'm telling you, she is a wealth of resource, because it really is. Like, to me, that's one of the most important things. It bums me out when I hear that people just don't enjoy walking with their dog. It's just, to me, for me, it's my stress relief. I love that time with my dogs. And
it's so zen. It could really be like the best time of your day.
It really, really can. And at a very, very deep level, from your dog's point of view, it is a very powerful bonding time.
Yes.
Okay. Looks like a great question here from Shelley. If someone has been doing a lot of positive reinforcement training with the dog to work on reactivity, and the dog has a strong reinforcement history for the look at the trigger, look back at me, and now there's the expectation of the treat, how do you transition to the bat training where you're now not really giving a treat, but just allowing them to be self-reinforced via the behavior option? That's a good question.
Yeah, I had that exact problem with my dog Peanut. And then also when I was teaching a seminar in Sweden where the dogs are super crazy trained, I had to sort of retrain them how to be dogs rather than the sort of robotic, look, I saw a trigger and back at you. So basically what I do is I start off in an area that doesn't have a trigger and just start to teach the dog the concept of walking on a loose leash, but without constantly getting any sort of reinforcement. And then when they do notice a trigger, I might give small praise and then say all done, right, which is my end of reinforcement signal. And but that way they're getting some information, they're getting acknowledgement from me, but they're not getting a huge reinforcer. So it's just like a small little social connection, but not a big treat reinforcer. And so you just start to fade it out. So it's a like, thank you for looking at me, and okay, let's go sniff. But if the dog does look at you and sort of they're like, kind of stuck, like why are we not getting any treats right now? Then you just kind of like walk in a neutral direction and give the dog a chance to encounter an odor that hopefully then gets them to drop their nose back down, and then you can go back to following them.
Now, I wonder if my lab will ever not, and she doesn't get treats, walking and doing all that stuff. We try to watch her weight so much, but man, she's going to take up every opportunity. Do you, maybe just one crumb?
How about this time? Right. And
maybe.
It's not the end of the world. Like, it's great that they look back at you. But the moment that they look back at you, now they're no longer in that conversation. And it's sort of like if you were trying to teach a 2-year-old human social skills, right? How to say hello to another 2-year-old human. And, constantly they were like, look, mommy, I talked to the boy. Look, mommy. And so the boy's going to be like, are you talking to me? Or are you talking to your mom? Like, what's this interaction? It's weird. And so,
that's a good analogy.
Fade it out.
Analogy. That's great. So I'm curious what, and you guys, again, please feel free to pop in questions, but I want to ask you, Grisha, because you have been training for many, many years. What inspired you to become a dog trainer, to pursue this path? And more importantly, what inspired you to really hone in on this segment within the dog training world?
I would say, so I was a mathematician before I was a dog trainer. And first of all, just loving dogs it was so much more fun than trying to teach people.
I'll attest to that.
Yeah. So I have to say I did really enjoy the math part, but then trying to teach it, to unwilling students. So I started volunteering at a shelter. Well, I got a dog named Spoon, and then I started volunteering at a shelter. And when eventually at some point the trainer there said, you could be teaching your own classes. And then I thought, And so I started a class there and just kind of grew bigger and bigger. So I just, did the one class in Seattle. And then eventually I was teaching math full time and teaching dogs full time simultaneously. And
Wow.
so, yeah. And so I decided I would just go for it with the dogs. It took me a little while. I was trying to make that, like, make the plunge or take the plunge. And I was driving down the freeway in Seattle, going on a place that, like, the road changes depend on what direction you're going, like whether you can drive it in or not. So there's these diamonds on the road. And I was telling myself, if I could make it over all of those sort of traffic diamonds without hitting them with my tires, then I could quit my job. And I did it day after day, like for 2 weeks. And then I was never successful. And finally I thought, if I'm trying this hard to find a way to quit my job, I just need to quit my job.
Just quit your job. Yeah. That's so funny.
Yeah. So I did. And then got into just doing dog training, which at the time I didn't realize was only going to be nights and weekends. I thought it was nights and weekends because it fit into my other job. And then I realized that's when other people also mostly have available. So eventually, I was able to sort of cruise back into a daytime version. But
that's so good. And then
I'm not sure I answered your question. There was another piece.
Well, I was just going to call it out. Julianne, she walks for miles. He does exhaust her arm. Longer leash, but he'll pull. Pulls worse if he has the harness on the front and back hooked. Changed back to the collar, but not a choke collar. And he seems better with this. Should she go back to the harness is the question. Got
it. So I would say if he's doing better, it's because his airways is being restricted, right? So on a collar, the trachea really just gets squished into. And so it would be probably out of pain that it's working better. And so I would, before you switch back to a harness, I would get some more information on how to do those leash skills. So just keep doing the collar for now, but learn how to do those leash skills and then get back into the harness. And I assure you it will work better. So the skills are important.
That's great. How did you decide, of all the different spectrum that one can operate in within dog training, how did you hone in on reactivity? Were you seeing more and more clients struggling with this behavior?
I would say it's mostly that. I would also say it's because of Peanut. So so he was my first brush with my own dogs having reactivity. And so he was afraid of men and bicycles and children and other dogs and all the things. And so he's definitely been my muse all the way through. He passed away at 13 about 3 years ago. But so learning from Peanut was really my main focus. And he actually, of course, was the reason I developed Bat as well, because the standard tools weren't working for him.
Got it. And speaking of tools, do you want to address the question from Deb? Julianne had asked or had mentioned the use of a recall collar for her dog. And Deb is now asking what that is.
I'm not sure what a recall collar is, but if it's one of those that has electricity, then I would say don't use it. So it's a really good way to accidentally create a phobia in your dog. It breaks down the relationship that you have, or it has a really good probability of breaking that down. Really, if you're focused on how can I stop my dog from doing something, it's the wrong approach. This will serve you not just with dogs, but in all of your relationships. If you really focus on what is the need that my dog has and how can I meet that need through behavior that I also like. So if your dog is running away, he has a need for exercise, or he has a need for play or whatever else. And so you can be using that as your reinforcer and starting to build up the space and the freedom, but your dog just isn't ready to have that freedom yet. If you're finding that you want to be using a shock collar, if that's what's happening. I'm not sure if that was the question.
Yeah. Okay, James, we won't tell anybody that you're on live, but stay on. He's here from work. So that brings me to another question. What do you feel the future? Where do you see the future of dog training going? I was just going to say more and more people are becoming purposefully educated. So where do you see this industry moving?
Well, so I would say the industry is really moving more and more toward, first of all, sharing the experiences that we have, sharing science, having training that's based on the best technology, and not just like the secrets that were passed down, from one trainer to another in, behind closed doors, but that this is actually a science that we can openly talk about and debate and find what's most ethical, and find what's most humane. And I would say I've talked to trainers across the whole spectrum, and they're always looking for, what's effective and what's the most humane. And I think it can be very hard for people who use more outdated tools to actually notice that another tool actually is effective. But once they do, we get more and more people using more humane tools. And by humane, I mean that the dog is empowered to get their needs met. We are using minimal, if any, force, always trying to not cause fear in the dog. So working to empower them to have a confident, full, enjoyable life. And for me, I would say that another piece of where we're headed is away from showing how much control we can have over our dogs, and moving toward how can we have dogs who have appropriate behavior but are getting their needs met, rather than just being like, I am the boss and I can prove that I'm bigger than a dog. Well, of course we're bigger than a dog, most of them. We can always come up with a tool that makes it so we can overpower them. But I think we're learning to train smarter and with more heart.
I agree. And I love the word empowered that you're using, because myself, not only as a trainer, but also as a leader within our company, there is so much power, if you will, in just releasing that power, that need for control, and providing the resources and the environment in which people, as well as the dogs, can rise into the best behavior, the best version of themselves, and and it feels good too when you get to make that choice, when there's that ability to choose and have some control over your domain, and also be guided along where and how to make the right choices. And there's just, in all relationships, I feel very strongly about that. So I love that you use that word, empowered, in your business model. Do you guys have any
actually
more?
Right behind me.
I know it is. It was you said it, and there it is. So what projects are you working on for 2020? I know you have a lot going on.
So one thing is I'm working on teaching and hosting a lot more online courses. So not just me, but having other trainers come in. So for example, the one with Michael Shikashio that's starting on April 20th. Sorry, I keep saying April, February 20th. And then so that's one thing. So live video courses. So not just courses with text, but actually being able to see people train in a practical way. Because I think there's a lot of theory out there. And I also think that a lot of these experts are able to demonstrate at seminars, but to be able to show a series of the work is really important.
I agree. Yeah. The visual is really helpful. Julian, thank you so much for your kind words to Grisha, because it is true, and you're doing the right thing. And you know what is also, I think, truth? You just do what you know is right, what feels good to you and your dog, and you're at your own pace, and the dog is also at its own pace. We don't get to dictate that, right? We just get to facilitate their ability to step into that place. So no, that's so good. I always ask, there's a couple more questions. Let's see, there are such pullers.
Oh, can I mention a project while you read that?
Oh, yes, you go ahead. You mention your project, and then I'll read the question.
Okay, yeah. So the other project I'm working on this year is a book. So another book called How to Human. So I've taught a course last year, which is life skills for humans, based on a lot of the things that we know about dogs and mammals and all that. Yeah. So because I know a lot of us dog folks really, we struggle. We're givers, and there's a lot of room for thrival that we can do that is similar to what we do with dogs. So I can teach it to people in a way that's a lot easier to receive if you already know about dogs. Yeah. And the better off we are, the less stress we have, the better our dogs have, the better their quality of life as well. So it's something we can do for our dogs and our families, is to work on our own stress levels. So that's what that book's about.
Totally agree. That is my heart-centered passion. We at Dog is Good also have something centered around that called Fur Covered Wisdom, and how a dog can change the way you see the world. And it really is very important. It's the perfect opportunity to take these anecdotal lessons that they bring to us each and every day. And interestingly, we'll pop that in. If you want a note of inspiration from your dog each and every week around these lines, you can do that by signing up for Fur Covered Wisdom through the Dog is Good website too. And Stephanie can pop that in there if she likes. All right, we're going to wrap up. I want to thank everybody for staying tuned and for your patience as we had some major technical difficulties getting this conversation launched earlier. But I want to mention to go to Grisha's website. I know a lot of people struggle with this challenge, and there really are some very resourceful tools and some strategies and methodologies that will make your life easier and create an opportunity for your dog to experience the life that you so want to bring to them. And Grisha is the expert to do that. So please check out her website. I also want to remind you to enter to win the giveaway, which is the Dog is Love t-shirt, which is awesome. And the spot in Grisha's training, not yet announced, a free ticket for that as well. So you can enter that, and we'll be announcing the winner. Usually we wait a day to do that. I always like to end our conversations with our guests. You're welcome, Shelley. I'm so glad you joined. With these questions. The first question is, if you were a dog breed, like what breed best describes you, what would you be?
You know, I thought about this question, and I would say I'm probably some sort of like a street dog, like a blend of all of the dogs.
I can see that. Totally. I totally can see that.
Yeah. So
awesome.
But I think because there's a lot of self-reliance in those dogs,
yes.
and also kind of an optimism as well. So being able to go, find solutions that are out there that, I don't know.
That fits you perfectly. So well articulated. What, fill in this blank, what is the greatest lesson that dog has taught you?
Okay. And I'm actually going to circle back if that's okay, which is that for the course, it's not announced yet, but it is on my site. Actually, if you go to courses, there's a link to it there for the Michael Shikashio.
Oh,
so anyway, yes. So the lesson the dog has taught me, I would say patience. Because anytime that I think I know something, if I really am patient and I watch the dogs more, I will learn more.
Yes, such a good one. And fill in this blank. Dog is my
muse.
So good. So good. Well, Grisha, I so appreciate you taking time out, and I appreciate your patience too as we struggle with the technology. For those of you staying online here, I do want to introduce myself again, Gila Kurtz with Dog is Good, and everything you want to learn about our company, you can check out at the website. We have great conversations with experts like Grisha every other week, although I think in this month we're doing it every week for National Dog Training Month. Nice. But we so appreciate you guys. And look forward to having you join our community, become part of our crew, and have a wonderful, wonderful week ahead. Grisha, any last words?
Thanks, Gayla. I just want to say I love your gear, your shirts and everyone, hats and all that stuff. It's
thank
awesome.
You. Yep. Thank you. I remember just a little sidebar when we were at the conference together, APDT, God knows how many years ago already.
A decade and a half or something.
And I said, one day, I think I'm going to make, I'd like to have a company that does stuff. And then here we are.
Right.
So you guys, all you have to do is just say it, and then it happens.
So, I'll put in lots and lots of work after that.
Just a little bit. Just a little bit. But okay, Deb, thank you too. You guys, good night. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Take care.